This is Mom Brian with AVNation and ISE 2022 with Rob Muddyman from
Thank
Zeevee.
you. Well done.
Yes, sir.
You got it right.
I tried. you helped me with that. How's your show been?
Pretty good, actually. I think the hall we're in, because there's all new geography for people to get used to. Took a little while for people to get through, but by the afternoon, mid-morning, things were going well. It's been a lot busier today as well.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Yeah, we're recording this the third day of the show. It still seems to be rather busy, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Talk for a second about we know Zeevee as AV over IP. You guys have been in that side of the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
But when you look at AV over IP and you look at kind of that standardization across the board, do you see it going that way, or do you still see kind of the wild, wild west?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in the past, it's been the wild, wild west. I mean, you've had matrix switches around for quite some time. We went from analog to digital. That was a very, very big transition, 10 years plus ago. And then for the digital, we had this technology called HD-Base-T. It was designed to move video over category cable, and it was designed into matrix switches by different manufacturers. The problem was, even then, there was no real compatibility on this same technology from Valens between different manufacturers because they did things differently. So as an end user, you're taking the decision to go, you need to solve the problem. You moved from analog to digital, you need to solve the problem, and then you choose a camp to go in. So you're in a vendor's camp and you're stuck in that vendor's camp. So that's a bit of a pain point for end users. And then you've got all the other pain points that existed with those matrix switches. So the fact that you've got the fixed size switches, expensive to upgrade, etc., and maintain, all of that. We're moving to AV over IP now, and I think there's a great opportunity to put right a lot of those things in the past. More than that, the end users, kind of from experiences they've got in the past, plus the fact that IT departments are getting involved now with some of these decisions, that they're more knowledgeable, they want to learn, they want to understand. So yeah, that's really important, and part of that means that we, as a company, Zeevee, have to be somewhat educators, but also we want to give people a choice. We don't want to say, what's your application, what are you trying to solve, and just have one solution and shove it down their throat or whatever. We want to understand the application. We want to understand the budget and how they're going to implement it.
So talk about that choice for a second, because one of the things that the engineers have in dealers, they sometimes it is the trap of too many choices, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm trying to solve this one thing. I have 20 to choose from. How do you help the dealers and their engineering staff kind of hone in on one or two and then start that process?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. 7 odd years ago when we started off with IP, probably 6 years ago we launched our uncompressed solution, and we came to this show with somewhat of a novelty, I think. I mean, we weren't the first because other companies like SVSI had done it before us, and there were other companies doing AV over IP. But you go out there today and there's a multitude of companies offering AV over IP. So if I'm an integrator, I'm going to be confused, let alone an end user. There's a lot of confusion. So the approach that we take, we look at, we have a conversation, ideally with the end user involved, or if not, with the integrator. We'll look at what problem they're trying to fix or solve. And as part of that, we'll also consider it's AV over IP, so it's got to go on a network. Is it going to go on your existing network? Are you going to build that network out? Is it going to be in a parallel network? What's it going to look like? Do you need to move video everywhere? Every video source needs to go everywhere? Or are you going to do, look at the real use case, which might be a little bit more restrictive? Because that can save money on the network cost and simplify the design, which is also important. I think the other thing that we look at in that situation is budget, of course. That's important because we can design the perfect system that does everything, but there'll be a price with that. And then the third point really is to look at on that network they're putting it on is the bandwidths that they've got available. So we look at all of those things, and we, as a company, we don't have a fixed agenda on what to push. We listen. So, with AV over IP right now, with all those solutions out there, the one thing to understand about video is that it uses a lot of bandwidth. Yeah, and if you're going to put it over a network, you have to understand that. If you've got enough bandwidth, you don't have to compress it. Yeah. So that's one way to go. If you've only got a 1 gig network, for sure, you're going to have to compress that video. So then the conversation is, well, what is compression going to do for you? Is that going to become an issue, or can you live with the effects of compression, which means image quality is not perfect, and there will be some latency, because compression needs processing, which takes time, which adds latency. So those are the sort of conversations we have. If you're a complete purist, you would say the original matrix switches that solved the problem, when they were 1080p, there was no compression. Yeah. You can imagine how weird it would have been a few years ago if someone had brought out a matrix switch that used compression. Everyone would have thought, what's going on here? There's something weird, and probably nobody would have bought it, right? We're now at the AV over IP, so we understand that if it's going to go on a 1 gig network, or if it's going to go across a campus, or even the internet, you have to compress. Yeah. It's a fact. So I'm not saying compression is a bad thing at all. There's a place for it.
It's a consideration, right?
It's a consideration.
Those,
yeah. Absolutely. And it's the point is to have the discussion and make the end user, ideally, and the integrator understand the impact, what they're doing. Make the right decision based on what their requirements are.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap up here, what are a couple of things you guys are showing folks this week at ISE?
Okay, so the big thing about AV over IP or any system is how it's managed. Yeah. And we've put an awful lot of development in over the last 7 years on our management platform. And the whole point of that is that it makes ease of installation, super fast installation, probably 10 times quicker, we've been told by most integrators, than any other system that's out there on the market. Okay. That's not my quote, that's the integrators tell us on a regular basis, which is really important. And then all the features and capabilities within that management platform that make the maintenance, support, and future flexibility and expansion of that system very straightforward and simple, because we believe it should be like that. Yeah. So this is something that we're showing very heavily, but as I said, we don't have a fixed agenda particularly with AV over IP, but we do have solutions which are heavily compressed, which is H.264, H.265. We have the uncompressed, which is based on SDVE, and we have the one in the middle, which is JPEG 2000, right? Which a lot of people have, and that's the common, if you like, at the moment, because 1 gig networks and people think they need that type of solution to go on there. But they all work on the same management platform, which is really, really important, I think. And what we're trying to show on the show is these technologies, and really let people understand what it means to use the different technologies on that management platform, and what benefits they get if they go for an uncompressed solution. In actual fact, we were a founding member of SDVE. Yep. In fact, we were working on this technology 2 or 3 years before.
Before there was an SDVE.
Before there was an SDVE, actually. And we shipped our first systems, 1 year after that technology was first developed by the guys at Aptivision up in Montreal, Canada. So we know that technology very, very well. I said we were a founding member. That technology has a lot of advantages. Okay, it's based on a chipset from Semtech, which means that anyone who uses that chipset, there's some interoperability. Yeah. And that's a major, major plus, that we know now that we can connect up to other SDVE devices from other manufacturers, and we can send video and audio and vice versa. Yeah? That's really important. And we're already seeing quite a few projects where we're working with other vendors. It might be a company like Analog Way, who also has an SDVE device, where we're connecting into their their processor
Yeah.
to send and receive video. Now, partly as a manufacturer, ouch, I'm no longer selling those endpoints, right?
Yeah.
That's a downside. But I think we've just got to look at this for the benefit of us long term and the end users, because they've been through all this thing in the past with proprietary and being caught siloed with a particular vendor, that we can move away from that, and they're the winners in the end. And I think if we don't go that route, ultimately, you're going to have a lot of dissatisfied customers, and it's the way it's going to go.
Yeah. And
it has to go that way.
And we won't be in business very long. So
we won't be in business very long. I mean, the whole thing of moving to Ethernet as a standard platform now for the switch is fantastic. So with AV over IP, you have H.264, H.265, which is heavily compressed.
Yep.
Not really suitable for a meeting room or general purpose, but it's good for digital signage or motion video, or if you have to send video across the internet. And then, at the top end, I think it's going to end up being, I believe, SDVE. That's where our money's on. There's now 60 plus vendors with interoperability. I mean, there are other standards out there that are coming about right now, but it just doesn't make sense otherwise. And when the price points are coming down, 10 gig switches, the endpoint prices are coming down, you now really can put a 10 gig system in from Zeevee based on SDVE, and it's at a very similar price point to our competitors' 1 gig JPEG 2000 type solution. Probably a little bit below, even taking into account the cost of the network. So, yeah.
All right, Rob, someone wants to get a hold of Zeevee, how do they do that?
Well, quite simply, just go onto our website, and it's www.zeevee.com, and Zeevee spelled ZEEVEE.com. It's sometimes difficult for British people. And there's a way to contact us on there.
And Canadians.
And Canadians, sorry.
Rob Moneyman from Zeevee, thanks so much.
Thank
for us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Find more videos from ISE 2022. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.